Ongoing murder of Indian democracy. Let's wake up and stop it. Booklet reading dated 21st April 2026. Part 3. A look at the conduct of ECI, Election Commission of India, in 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Vote for Democracy report. Let's take a look at the conduct of Election Commission of India, the ECI, in 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Many people believe that parliament elections in 2024's schedule was designed in a way that favored BJP. Further, during election campaigns, many people believed that ECI was very lenient towards BJP in matters of violations of code of conduct and much harsher towards opposition parties. The most startling allegations, however, came when a group of people called Vote for Democracy analyzed the ECI announced polling percentages at the end of the day of polling versus the final figures announced several days later. There were huge increases in the final figures several days later compared to initial end of day figures. ECI never bothered to meaningfully explain the reasons. Vote for Democracy report on 2024 Lok Sabha elections. On 22nd July 2024, a group called Vote for Democracy made a press release of its 222-page detailed report showing how there was vote manipulation and misconduct during voting and counting, and how in a minimum of 79 Lok Sabha seats in 15 states, BJP and NDA benefited from this manipulation. Prima facie, this led to a stealing of mandate of the people in the formation of union government. ECI had behaved not only in a partisan way favoring BJP and NDA, but in a very mysterious fashion in how it was releasing figures on the total number of votes cast in the elections in different parliamentary constituencies. As per principles of free and fair elections, the figures on the number of people who voted should be released immediately upon conclusion of voting. This should be a very basic requirement. Voting typically closes at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. in the evening. Election rules require that the number of votes cast in each booth should be released by the BLO or booth level officer in writing to BLAs, booth level agents. BLAs are agents appointed by the different political parties. There is a provision for that. And they sit in the voting booth to try and make sure that the voting is done properly. Election rules require that the number of votes cast in each booth should be released by the BLO in writing to the BLAs, signed by the BLO and BLAs in a form prescribed by Election Commission itself called Form 17C. Ethics require that this information should be made publicly available soon thereafter. With current day technology, the total votes cast in each parliamentary constituency can be easily compiled and published the same evening. After further verification if necessary, there can be a confirmation of the figures as final, either the same evening or the next morning at the latest. If there are any mismatches between the initial end of day figures and the final figures, ethics would require that a proper, transparent and detailed explanation should be publicly released. As you can see, there should be no reason if the process is conducted properly, unless there are some arithmetic mistakes. There shouldn't be arithmetic mistakes also. There should be no valid reason for a difference between the end of day figures and the final figures ordinarily. But in any case, ECI did not follow such a process of explaining any mismatches between the end of day figures and the final figures. In 2024, parliamentary elections were held in 7 phases. On each day, in each phase at about 7 p.m., ECI, which is Election Commission of India, released the figures for total votes cast on that day, but without details of constituency-wise and booth-wise figures. They only released the votes cast in each phase in each state as a percentage of the total voters in the voter rolls. After phase 1, they released the so-called final figures 11 days later. For subsequent phases, they released the final figures for such voting 3 to 5 days after the initial figures released on the voting day at the end of voting, end of day figures. The final figures were also only as a percentage of the total voters enrolled. And there were huge discrepancies between the initial figures released on the day of voting and the final figures initial figures released at the end of day figures released on the day of voting, and the final figures released after a gap of many days as above. ECI offered no meaningful explanation as to why such discrepancies had to be there. After all, to give the end of day voting figures, there has to be a dependable method for ECI to gather and collate the voting numbers from each booth. If not, how does ECI come up with end of day voting figures? If yes, why should there be any discrepancies between end of day figures and final figures? Ideally, there should be zero discrepancies. If discrepancies do occur, they would have to be minor and should have valid explanations. ECI had no meaningful explanations. Using these discrepancies and other publicly available data, the VFD report, that's Vote for Democracy report, estimated that a minimum of 79 parliamentary seats have perhaps been improperly, in quotation marks, won by BJP and NDA in 2024. Thus improperly leading to BJP-led NDA to form the present government of the Union of India. Between the initial end-of-day figures and the final figures, there were always increases in the number of votes cast. In some states, the increase was as much as 10% or more of the votes polled as per initial end-of-day figures. A total of about 5 crore, that is 50 million, seemingly fake votes were added this way. Does it not raise serious questions of manipulated election results? In many states, the average increase in votes per parliamentary constituency was between 1 to 2 lakh votes. That's 100,000 to 200,000 votes. In many cases, the margin of winning was less than the average increase in voting figures between the initial end-of-day voting figures and final voting figures, further indicating that the final results have been very substantially affected by these discrepancies between the initial and final voting figures. These increases in the final figures have very substantially benefited BJP-led NDA. For complete information about this, you can freely download a 17-page PDF booklet, kannadaindians.com/SIR or Democracy in Danger -English or Kannada.